I rise today to speak on the Parks and Public Lands Legislation Amendment, Central West and Other Matters Bill 2025. Not to question the value of our natural environment, but to challenge the illusion that simply drawing lines, new lines on a map, is the same as protecting it. This bill promises new national and conservation parks across Central West Victoria. It speaks of legacy, of biodiversity, of recreation, but what it doesn't speak of, and what it fails to address, is the hard, unglamorous work of maintenance, of weed control, of fire mitigation, and of hard work on the ground. Victoria's bushlands have suffered extensive damage from bushfires over the past 2 decades, with millions of hectares burned, ecosystems degraded, and in 2009 the devastating loss of 182 lives, thousands of dwellings and structures having been lost. We've had devastating fires recently in my electorate and locally in the Grampians and Budgebim National Parks. Yet effective land and fire management has deteriorated under Labor. Analysis of Parks Victoria's annual reports over the last 10 years show a sharp decline in the capacity to manage park estates. Despite 20% increase in land under management by the government, operational funding cut by the government has fallen by 35%. Rangers' numbers have decreased, dropping 28% in the past year alone. Now, our local park rangers, they do work tirelessly to preserve the beauty of our parks, but it's a struggle that they cannot do alone without the support, and they're not getting it. They're clearing trails, protecting wildlife, educating visitors, and their dedication is unwavering, and it certainly doesn't go unnoticed. Parks Victoria has become increasingly top-heavy, whilst on-the-ground capacity has withered. This decline has led to worsening conditions across the park network, particularly in 3 critical areas: fuel load management, reduction and capacity for planned burns, and mechanical fuel reduction increases the risk of catastrophic bushfires, and the evidence is clear that the government is failing. Invasive weeds, blackberry, serrated tussocks and other noxious weeds are spreading rapidly in undermanaged parks, and these species outcompete native flora, degrade habitat and increase fire risk by creating dense flammable understories. And I'll talk to you about the specific example in a moment in South West Coast. Pest animals such as foxes, rabbits are going rampant, deer and pigs are causing widespread environmental damage, and without adequate control, these pests destroy native vegetation and threaten biodiversity, and they undermine the ecological objectives of the parks themselves. Bushfires, invasive weeds and pest animals do not recognise a change in land tenure. We've seen what happens when governments focus on park creations without committing to long-term care, and look no further than the Kabobini National Park in South West Coast. Now, this was created under Steve Bracks. At the time, it was hailed as a triumph for conservation. In fact, the member for Western Victoria, Gail Tierney, said at the time it will permanently protect what is a very beautiful area. Well, not so much. Because of poor maintenance, there is an infestation of sweet pittosporum. Now, it's a native vegetation species, but it's not native to the Kabobini. So what's happened is it's creating a monoculture and absolutely threatening the biodiversity of that forest. It's a woody weed that is out of control. So locals are so concerned that they formed the South West Woody Weeds Action Group. Volunteers who work hard, come together once a week and try to beg for funds from government or try to make a difference to get something to occur before the forest is destroyed. But this small group of dedicated volunteers are doing their best to save the forest that's been smothered by sweet pittosporum. But without proper government support, their efforts are like trying to knit a jumper faster than someone else is unravelling it. Every stitch of progress they make is undone before they can finish the next row. It's not a lack of effort by the volunteers, it's a lack of backing by the Victorian Labor government, who create national parks, and this is the example, but then walk away. They don't do what's needed to care for it and maintain it. The locals see what's being lost and they will act, and they've come together, but they simply can't keep up with the threads keep being pulled so loose. So neglect of responsibility for environmental protections and infrastructure and maintenance is what we do not see once these areas are protected, and this is the perfect example. And as a result, native flora is being choked out. The very biodiversity we seek to protect is under threat, and not from development, but from neglect. The government's Glenelg Eden project, which began in 2008, was designed to combat weed infestations across 90,000 hectares of public land. However, more than 87 unique weed species have invaded the region, threatening native biodiversity and highlighting consequences of insufficient long-term maintenance. This example underscores my point. Creating parks is only the beginning. Without sustained investment in upkeep and ecological management, conservation efforts falter. In another area of the Cobobony, on the Great South West Walk, is another great treasure that is another area of neglect. This walk stretches 262 kilometres through some of the most breathtaking landscapes, and this loop showcases everything that makes South West Coast extraordinary. From rugged coastal cliffs and remote beaches to majestic river gorges and tranquil forests. It's a walk that speaks to the soul of our region. It's not just the scenery though, it's the story behind the Great South West Walk. It was a trail that was built by Portland High School students, their families and the community back in the 80s, 40 years ago. I went to the anniversary, must have been last year or the year before. And it's cared for by a dedicated group of volunteers who mow, weed, whippersnip and keep the track thriving. They're passionate and tireless volunteers and that are called the Friends of the Great South West Walk. And many of them cherish the Cobobony National Park and have contacted me numerous times over the last 2.5 years because of a modest footbridge called Ralph's Bridge that they built 40 years ago and have had problems because a tree fell on it in July 2023, 2.5 years ago now. So since then, this beautiful section of the trail has remained closed. Why? Bureaucracy. The volunteers did the right thing because it's in the national park and alerted the government to the problem. These are the volunteers I said who are whippersnipping, mowing, weeding and doing all the work for the government, but the government have said instead of being able to just get a chainsaw and remove the tree and rebuild the bridge like they'd done 40 years ago, they had to wait for an environmental assessment. It took 8 months for them to remove the tree, which the volunteers had to wait for that to happen. They then had insurance delays, and then came more bureaucracy. So now, 2.5 years later, despite their cries for common sense, the repairs, they're told, are out of scope for the volunteers to deliver. Remember, they did it 40 years ago themselves, and it lasted 40 years. Not a bad effort, and a tree fell on it and broke it. So not because of even dilapidation. But Parks Victoria now propose a full replacement, requiring heavy equipment to be brought to the site with the bridge intact instead of in parts, with significant disruption and no doubt much damage to the environment. The irony of the decision being made when this is about protecting the environment. So this despite the independent insurer even preferring a simpler repair using the existing timber. So the volunteers who have the capability, the skills and commitment have been ignored, and their offer of help to reinstate a bridge have been sidelined by the minister who should be honouring the spirit of volunteerism that built Ralph's Bridge in the first place. You wouldn't credit this, would you? Talk about allowing red tape to stand in the way of something so simple and so meaningful and so achievable. Ralph's Bridge should be opened. This is not about shortcuts. This is about common sense. It's about respecting the legacy of a community-built project and the people who maintain it. It's about reopening a treasured trail that connects people to nature, history and each other. And I call on Parks Victoria and the responsible minister to listen and truly listen and let the community do what's common sense. Creating new parks without a clear, funded and enforceable maintenance strategy is just not irresponsible, it's environmentally dangerous. It risks turning our most treasured landscapes into ecological disasters like the two examples that I've put forward here. And it betrays the very environmental values we claim to uphold. The real test of conservation is not just how many parks we create, but how well we care for them. If we are to expand our park system, then we must expand our commitment to maintaining it. Otherwise, we risk repeating the mistakes of the past, and that's what Labor
Member
do
for
very
Albert
well.
Park.